Hello everyone, Dev and Jacket Live. Today we're gonna talk about how to run a schedule job in .NET Core. And the scenario when you need to do that could be the following. Let's assume we have a web API and we have our clients that are downloading some kind of a daily report, which contains a big amount of different data. And if we develop it like in a straightforward approach, probably this data will be fetched from the database. And such operations as aggregating the data for a high-load system may result in slowness of such an endpoint. And this issue we're gonna solve today. Here is a schema that sheds some light on the issue. If we assume that we have a data in our database, and for daily report, we need to fetch this data from it. And if there is a lot of data here, apparently it will be slow, and probably we'll want some kind of a caching solution that will allow us to move from this straightforward schema to kind of this one. And ideally, our controllers and our APIs, we just need to read the data. Ideally, they will not call the database directly, but use all the data from the cache. And if we go this route, we'll improve the user experience for our clients. But in order to do that, we need to produce some logic that will allow us to populate this cache by a schedule or by some other trigger and make it always actual and good enough for our clients. So, and today we're gonna solve this with ASP.NET Core and the background. Okay, we're in Visual Studio, and here we have an API project, which includes a reports controller and a get endpoint that simulates report generation. And under the hood, we're calling a report data source. And this one simulates a call to the database. Therefore, we have a thread sweep here. Just wait for 5 seconds and emphasize that the call is slow and return some more data. That's it. Let's see that this API works. Just run it, and I'll make a simple call from Fiddler. And here we are. We are in get client, waiting for 5 seconds, and eventually returning the data. So we have a result, and it gets returned to the end user. Okay, cool. This works, but again, that's very simple guy, because we need to fetch a lot of data from the database. Apparently, we need a cache to pre-populate this data. And let's start from adding a service that will be responsible for cache population. So let's call it report cache background job. And inherit it from the background service. Embedded class, the .NET Core. And we need to implement just execute async method. Let's just write to console hello world. And return a completed task. That's it, and put a breakpoint here to see when it gets executed. And not to forget, we need to register it in the startup. So we write services, add hosted service, and our report cache background job. That's it. Okay, seems like it should be enough. Let's just run our application. So it gets started. So wake it up a bit, and here we are. We can see that the background job gets executed. But so far it's useless. It just executed once, but we need to constantly update the cache. And ideally, we would like to control the schedule by which this service will be running. For example, if we need to run it like every 30 minutes or every hour or every day. And here we have a solution that we're going to implement. In the NuGet package, recently I posted Easy Extensions Background Service Extensions package, which is a suitable way of registering scheduled services. Now let's just download the package and let's see what it will allow us to do. First of all, we need to inherit not from the not from the background services, but from scheduled service base, and implement. We'll just need to implement a constructor and execute async instead of execute job async method. So let's move this code here, and we no longer needed this method. Great. So right now we are inheriting from a scheduled service base, which is a part of the NuGet package. And as a parameter, we would like to get some options class, and we will need to bypass expression, which is cron expression. We'll get back to it in a minute, to the scheduled service base class, which will be responsible for running the service base, which will be running this method by schedule. So far, we just registered options here, but now we need to go to the startup and replace this registration with a new one. That's scheduled service. It will be report cache background job. And as a parameter, we need to pass configuration. Apparently, we're doing that to allow ourselves to configure the schedule. So go to the app settings class and add a section, scheduled services, which can be extended with as many services as we want. Here we just add in a property which name matches the name of the class of the background job. So it's report cache background job. And two parameters. One is expression, which is, as I mentioned above, a cron expression. And these magic numbers, this magic string literally means that we want this service run every 10 minutes. If you're interested, feel free to dig into cron, what's a cron, and what kind of schedules it allows to stop and how to do it. So for simplicity, we just use this guy, which means every 10 minutes. And a second parameter, which is enabled flag, true, says that we want to register this job and run it. It's a pretty useful feature to configure these background jobs per environment. For example, probably on the debug, on local debug, you not really need it in the background job every time, so you may just keep it disabled. Or in some lower environments, if you're not interested in running the job constantly, you may as well just leave it disabled and save some resources from your machine. Okay, great, we are almost there. So the last thing we forget to do is to basically implement execute job async. But before we do that, let me add a few more lines of code here. We will need to get a service provider instance. Since the background job is a singleton that is instantiated at the start of application, we need to make sure we are resolving our dependencies correctly. And in order to do that, we need to create a scope every time we execute a job and get transient or singleton instances of services that we're going to use here. So for report data source, we are calling a service provider to resolve iReport data source and get an instance of this guy. And eventually we are getting the report data, and ideally we will put it into a cache. So let's add a cache as well. So that would be, for simplicity, let's just use a very simple approach. So just add a static dictionary that we will be populating, and in the reports controller, let's add the code that will read the data from it. Not in the controller, probably the data source. Right. So it's cache report data try get value. We just check if the data is already in the cache and return it. If not, again waiting for 5 seconds. And the last piece of puzzle is basically populating the cache. So in order to populate the cache, we'll just call it here. We get the data and try to add it to cache with. Again, for simplicity, let's just put a client ID number 1 here. Okay, and seems like it's enough to start. And let's run application again. Okay, let's make another call to the API. We go here, cache is empty, so we have to wait for 5 seconds to get the data, and that's it. And remember that we run the background job every 10 minutes. So I'll pause the recording for a moment and resume when we already execute the job. It's not 10 minutes. You might check our watch, but yeah, I just changed it to 1 minute in order not to wait so long. And let's just continue. So we're getting an instance of report data source. We are getting the data. It's not in a cache apparently. So we have to wait, and now we just put this data to the cache. And that's it. So now if we call our API, we'll see that the report data is in the cache and return it immediately. And here is again, in a minute, another run of a background job occurs, and we are ready to repopulate cache again and again. Let's recap. We added a background service that runs by a schedule and prepares a cache for report. And because of this cache, we improve performance of an endpoint that returns the report back to the user. Also, we added a configuration section where we can control using the cron expression how often the job should be running, and also there is a way that we can disable the job based on our needs per environment. That's it for today. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.